Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video we have to talk about Ram and the fact that they have completely priced themselves out of their buyer base. Before we get into this video though, as always, if you want to save time and money the next time you purchase a car, link to my car buying guide in the description down below. Let's get into it. Now, I actually just filmed a couple of comparisons the other day between Ram, Ford, and Chevy, and that's actually what prompted me to make this video, because for the first time since I started doing comparison videos, I noticed that Ram was no longer the value play that it used to be, and so I want to discuss a few things. First off, let's kind of talk about sales numbers and talk about what those sales numbers actually mean, and then we'll dive into what this means for Ram and then what I think Ram should do if they want to remedy the whole situation. When it comes to sales numbers, Ram is still most likely going to sell over 500,000 units this year, which is pretty strong considering everything that's happening within the car market and all of the declines that we're seeing across the board. And so, yeah, Ram's only down by about 5% this year compared to last year, so not horrible, and especially when you compare that to Ford, which is down by over 20% with their F-Series trucks in terms of sales volume. Like, Ram looks like they're doing pretty good, but I can tell you right now with what I'm seeing, I really, truly do think that this is the quote-unquote calm before the storm for Ram for a number of reasons. Although I just made a comparison with Ford in terms of their sales decline percentages, the reason that Ford is declining in sales numbers is not because people aren't buying Fords. It's actually because Ford just isn't able to build the trucks that people want. And so if they can get more supply, they'll actually start selling more vehicles. Whereas Ram, on the other hand, is not selling as many vehicles because people aren't buying Rams like they used to. Just go to a Ford dealership and go to a Ram dealership and you can see this like in real time, because at a Ford dealership, you might see some F-150s on the ground, but that's probably it. You're probably not going to see a single Super Duty, and if you do, it's already pre-sold. Whereas if you go to a Ram dealership, not only will you find 1500s, but you'll also find 2500s and even 3500s and even trucks that have options that are typically, perceived as desirable options where people are just going to run and buy that truck right away. I mean, for example, this last week, I filmed a Ram 3500 with the ICE-in transmission, and usually trucks with that transmission, like, they don't sit on dealer lots at all. And so it's like, okay, people are obviously not jumping in and buying Rams like they used to, whereas with other manufacturers, they're still buying them if they can get a hold of them. Now, if we break this down, you guys will be able to see exactly why this is happening to Ram. So first off, they released the 5th generation Ram trucks for the 2019 model year, and this covered the 1500 series trucks as well as the heavy duty trucks, and it just completely rocked the truck world. And this was actually when I was still working at the Ram dealership, and I remember it was a crazy time because people were trading in everything for these new Rams, because Ram showed the world that you can build a really good looking truck when it comes to exterior styling with an amazing interior that's super capable, that has a really strong powertrain, and it's also affordable. I mean, back in the 2019 sales year, like, it didn't make sense to buy any other truck other than the Ram because of everything that it offered. Well, since then, obviously, we still have the 5th generation Ram, and Ram has, made some updates to the truck. We have like the rear view camera mirror, the heads-up display, and they've updated the infotainment system, and we have more powertrains than were initially available at launch because, well, EcoDiesel, for example. And so, again, they've made some slight improvements to the truck, but it's ultimately still the same truck. And, well, speaking of EcoDiesel, they're getting rid of that, so that doesn't even matter anymore. Now, if we compare that to Ford, they did a pretty, heavy refresh on the F-150 for the 2018 model year, and that carried to 2020. And then for 21, they did a full-on redesign, which completely transformed the F-150. Like, the new F-150 has a much nicer interior. Exterior styling looks a lot better, and it rides way better. It is actually the best riding truck when it comes to like smooth pavement, but as soon as you go over a bump or something, the Ram always wins because the Ram uses multi-link in the back end, whereas the Ford utilizes leaf springs. But Ford has a new F-Series truck that's now competing against the 5th generation Ram. And then when it comes to GM, right, they redid their trucks for the 2019 model year, and then they just redid them again for the 2022 model year. And so Ram's two biggest competitors, Ford and GM, have trucks that are newer than Ram's truck. Now, that actually wouldn't be too big of an issue because the Ram 1500 was such a good truck at release that it's actually aged really well. And when you compare it to, Ford and Chevy, it still like holds up to them really well, even though it's technically the oldest truck in segment. But that's not the problem. So the problem here is that Ram has increased their prices too quickly and by too much. And this became really apparent to me when I did my three-way comparison this last week, because the last time I did one of these comparisons was approximately 2 years ago. And 2 years ago, whenever I did a comparison with all three of the brands, Ram was usually the least expensive and had the most amount of features, whereas this time around, the Ram was the most expensive or almost the most expensive and had the least amount of features compared to its competition, Ford and General Motors, which is not good because that is not what Ram's identity has become since they've released the 5th generation Ram trucks. With the 5th generation Ram trucks, Ram basically played the value card, right? We're going to give you more features and a better truck for less money, so people flocked, right? Whereas now it's like, okay, well, our truck is still, competitive with Ford and General Motors, but it also costs as much, but it also happens to have slightly less features in certain segments. And so it's just competitive at this point. It's not what it used to be. And so if Ram had basically released a new version of their truck and increased the prices with where they've increased them to, then that would actually make sense to buyers, because they'd be like, okay, I'm paying $10,000 or $15,000 more than my 5th generation Ram, but this is a new truck and it has these new features, so it makes sense. Whereas the situation we're in today is you basically are paying $10,000, $15,000, sometimes $20,000 more for a truck that you purchased in the 2018 or 2019 sales year, because you actually could get 5th generation Rams in the 2018 sales year, but you're getting the same exact truck, right? How does that make any logical sense? It doesn't. And obviously we can blame a lot that's happened over the last couple of years: inflation, supply chain issues, labor shortages, all that stuff, right? There's a reason why the prices have gone up, but Ram just didn't really play the situation as good as they could have, because if you look at what Ford and GM have done, well, GM has released a refresh version of their Silverado and Sierra, and so even though the prices are higher, people are willing to pay those prices because it feels like a new truck. And the same thing goes for the F-150. And so that is something that Ram really needs to consider. Now that gets me into the advice section of today's video, and it's pretty simple. Ram needs to pull back on their pricing increases because they don't have a shiny brand new product to sell people at this point. And I think a really good example is Ford just released the new Super Duty, and Ford dealers are selling out of their allocation for the new Super Duty. And it's extremely expensive, but people are really hyped up because it's a new product. And so Ram needs to, tweak a lot with the 1500, 2500, and 3500 to make it just feel new again, and then they'll be able to command those higher price premiums that they're asking right now on the current product. Because as good as the current product is, and I really stand behind that, like, I think Ram makes amazing trucks, it's not $15,000 to $20,000 better than the 2019 version of the product that we see today, right? Hopefully that makes sense. Like, it's great, but it's not that much better. And so they need to just pull back on the pricing for now. And I would do that. If they really want people to continue to buy their product, they should just pull things back for a little bit. And then once they release like the new Hurricane powertrain, they'll probably have some pricing power with that in the 1500. And then if they finally redo the cab in the heavy duty trucks so that we can have like a bigger crew cab, they'll have some pricing power with that. But until we get, some bigger changes with the truck, they just need to take a step back and calm down, or they're going to continue to see the sales figures decline, especially in the market that we're in right now, where everyone is declining across the board. And I think that we're in a situation where it's really easy to just, point fingers at the market and go, oh no, it's okay, the sales are declining because the market's declining. But it's like, no, that's part of it, but that's not the whole reason. It's like, you would actually be selling slightly more product if it was priced right. And right now, I mean, it's just a little bit too expensive. Let me know what you guys think about this whole situation. Let me know what you think Ram should do to kind of revive things. And I'm not saying that the brand's dying. They're still going to sell a lot of vehicles, but I really do see pretty large sales declines for Ram and for the other Stellantis brands in the near future, just because of all of these price increases over the last few years that have outpaced changes within the product. I think the Jeep brand will be fine because they've made a lot of changes within their lineup, but the Dodge brand, for example, the Ram brand and the Chrysler brand, it's like, well, yeah, we'll see what happens. Anyways, I'll see you guys.